All right. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is His Excellency Reverend Dr. Devon Bannister. I am the Pro Chancellor for Psyche International University and Seminary. I am the President and Founder for MacBank Corporation, as well as I am one of the representatives for the Irene Menakaya legacy. Um, Indeed, it is a great honor and privilege to have each of you here. I want to say thank you very much to all of the distinguished ambassadors that we have here joining us, the distinguished doctors, the distinguished prince and princesses, um, and everyone else in your respective office. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence and for making this event today a success. I know it means a great lot to the board of the Barr Juni and Irene Menakaya Foundations. So we want to say thank you very much for bracing us with your presence and availing your time to speak and to share today in this great milestone. To all of our viewers there who are here with us via Facebook Live or whichever other means that you're joining us via by phone or right here on Zoom, thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us for this wonderful occasion today. Today, you're going to be hearing a lot of things, a lot of great work that the foundation has been doing, and at the same time, we're going to focus a little bit on the post United Nations High Level Political Forum, and you will be hearing from some of these distinguished ambassadors of their great input and how we can be able to move forward and at the same time be agents of change and make our contributions in whatever way possible as we give insights to matters and situations and many things throughout what's going on in today's world. So um, I just want to read to you briefly the whole backdrop behind today's event. So the United Nations have considered education as an aspect of the development agenda that require ample attention in order to achieve the 17 goals the 17 goals, sorry, and 169 targets success by 2030. So with 9 years remaining to the 2030 agenda, global learning crisis has erupted, disrupting education and learning in the developing countries, thereby making it imperative that not every child who is in school acquire learning. So let me read that again. With 9 years remaining to 2030 agenda, global learning crisis has erupted, disrupting education and learning in the developing countries, thereby making it imperative that not every child who is in school acquires learning. Let that sink in. Ponder upon that a little bit. The SDG and its targets are pursuing innovative and action-oriented strategies that will ensure that quality education is inclusive in all ramifications for lifelong learning globally, leaving no community behind. So, in the development world, the quality of basic education is often exponentially low due to the lack of adequate facilities, competent teachers, textbooks, parental support, and community involvement. So, however, this has been thwarted by global crises such as COVID-19, climate change, migration, and displacement due to war and conflicts, making school not an instrument for learning. So global learning crisis continues to threaten millions of students, children, and families, widening social and learning gaps, making learning more prone to moral and economic crisis, and inability of education stakeholders to provide information on who is learning and who is not. Education for all in the broader capacity can best be portrayed as an important global issue with strong commitment to bridging the gap in global learning for quality and inclusive education in community classrooms. The second Barr Juni and Irene Menakaya Legacy Lectures at CITADA, that is CTADA, on the theme Global Learning Crisis, a Gap in Community Classroom. The theme again, Global Learning Crisis, a Gap in Community Classroom. We'll reflect on these issues with focuses on teaching, learning, teachers, curriculum, leadership and development, funding, and technology through discussion. And we're going to look at quality and inclusive education in community classroom, technology and innovative solutions, pillars of learnings in bridging the gap on community education, professional development, and skill training. Um, so the outcome with respect to the objectives of the second legacy lecture on global learning crisis, a gap in community classroom, will seek action orientation solutions. So I'm going to stop there for now, and I'm going to ask our president, the president of Barr Juni and Irene Menakaya Foundation International, to come and give us a recap from the 2021 High-Level Political Forum that was recently held. So I'm going to ask Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Ada Okika to come and give us a recap before we get into anything else. So, President, Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador Bannister, for that opening section. As we all know, these Barr Juni legacy lectures always follows after the United Nations High-Level Political Forum, because the vision and the mission for this foundation is rooted on the 2030 Development Agenda with very special reference to SDG 4. So in this dimension, we want to have a recap to the last concluded United Nations High-Level Political Forum, which was held from the 6th of July to the 15th of July 2021. Since the adoption of the SDGs and the move into the 2030 Development Agenda, the High-Level Political Forum is held every year to evaluate the successes of SDGs across member states. Each of these years, the SDGs are brought into discussions, and the Irene Menakaya School, with the Barr Juni and Irene Menakaya Foundation, utilizes it as a platform to address gaps and challenges on education in community classroom. This year's high-level forum was focused on 9 of the 17 SDGs. The goal of the high-level political forum this year was to discuss the Sustainable Development Goals 1 on no poverty, SDG 2 on zero hunger, SDG 3 on good health and well-being, SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth, SDG 10 on reduced inequalities, 12 on responsible consumption and production, 13 on climate action, 16 on peace, justice and strong institutions, and 17 on partnership in details. According to the Secretary General of United Nations, he mentioned, let us renew our determination to build a strong, sustainable, and inclusive recovery from the pandemic, and to take decisive action together to defeat the climate crisis and keep the promises of the 2030 Agenda. The theme this year echoed through the viral panel discussions and presentations throughout the 8-day meeting. The COVID-19 pandemic had triggered the worst global recession since 1930, caused immense suffering and setbacks efforts to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals and its Sustainable Development Agenda. Participants highlighted increased poverty rates and hunger, decreased number of children in schools, job losses, increased debt burdens, growing inequalities, along with increased human rights violations, all linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet, at the same time, many said the solution exists to recover and build back better. Panelists at this section focused on the importance of social protection systems, sustainable agriculture, digitalization, creating new debt relief and financial architecture, and strong partnership between civil societies, the private sector, government, and international community, among others, as the way to get back on track. The forum focused on the theme of sustainable and resilient recovery from COVID-19 pandemic that promotes the economic, social, and environmental dimension of sustainable development, building an inclusive, effective path for the achievement of 2030 agenda in the context of the decade of action and delivery of sustainable development. To that end, the forum reviewed progress on the following: SDG 1, no poverty; 2, zero hunger; 3, good health and well-being; 8, decent work and economic growth; 10, reduced inequalities; 12, responsible consumption and production; 13, climate action; SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions; and SDG 17, partnership. The report indicates the outcome from the 2021 high-level political forum indicates: 1, the Economic and Social Council President, Ambassador Munia Akram from Pakistan, referenced the devastating global impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, especially on the poorest people and countries. He emphasized using the 2030 Agenda and Addis Ababa Action Agenda on financing for development as guides to deal with current challenges. As the chair of the high-level political forum, which is a meeting under the auspices of ECOSOC, the UN Economic and Social Council, Ambassador Akram encouraged participants to use the forum as a platform to demonstrate an unwavering commitment to the 2030 agenda. Macky Sall, who is the president of Senegal, called for equal access to vaccines and additional financing for low-income countries, especially in Africa. He noted the need to overhaul the global economic system, including reform of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, rules on credit export conditions, clamping down on illicit financial flows and tax evasions. He welcomed the US proposal for a global minimum corporate tax rate. Tedros Adhanom, the Director General World Health Organization, described how the COVID-19 responses has become an issue of the haves versus have-nots. He encouraged continued commitment through the COVAX initiative to ensure developing countries have access to more vaccines, data, information, resources, technology, and health tools, so that every nation can keep its people safe. He said the World Health Organization urged member states to focus on 3 key priorities: sharing vaccines, providing financing to ensure countries have the health tools to combat the virus, and sharing the mRNA technologies as well as scientific and technological capacities and capabilities. Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director for IMF, the International Monetary Fund, drew attention to the fact that for the first time in 20 years, the fight against poverty is falling behind. She encouraged countries to mobilize additional resources and finance, focusing on the private sector to spur growth. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General, World Trade Organization, stressed that the World Health Organization has played a crucial role during the pandemic by urging member states to exercise restraint on trade restrictions. She called on member states to free up vaccine supply chain by lowering restrictions, work with developing countries to identify supply bottlenecks, and share intellectual property, technology, and knowledge on vaccine production. Michael Kramer, University of Chicago Development Innovation Lab, Becker Friedman Institute for Economics, and the Nobel laureate in 2019, spoke about the role of innovation in promoting sustainable development goals. He highlighted the position of government and institutions in providing both physical and policy innovation that address the issues of global pandemic. On the SDGs in a time of crisis, a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient recovery from COVID-19 as an opportunity to realize the SDGs. Liu Zimmerman, Under Secretary General of Economic and Social Affairs, presented the Secretary General report on progress towards SDGs and measures to realize SDGs during the COVID-19 pandemic, describing how the pandemic has undermined decades of development efforts. The panelist section, moderated by Achim Steiner, Administrator of UN Development Programme (UNDP), focused on how to recover from pandemic and realize the SDGs, especially in education, including investing in girls' education, encouraging COVID-19 vaccination to help children return to school, ensuring internet connectivity in school, and protecting children from abuse. Other comments focus on targeted subsidiaries for small and medium-sized enterprises, universal health policies, data innovation, public-private partnership, debt relief, and conditional cash transfers. There were also calls to prioritize inclusion and equity in caregiving sector, which represent 9% of the global gross domestic production. Ensuring that no one is left behind, Jane Barrett, Secretary General, International Federation on Aging, noted millions of the most vulnerable have been left behind. The section recommended a human rights-based approach to pandemic recovery, increased social spending, and improved internet access, which one panelist called a lifeline during the pandemic and is critical enabler of human development. The panel also addressed challenges that LDCs faced during the pandemic, including reduction in trade and tourism, and the groups that were most affected by the pandemic. They had to reach missing middle, especially in the global south. There was also a call for rapid financial support for developing countries, including unconditional grants to meet healthcare needs and countries, and create safety net policies to address youth employment and mental health, integrated data for development, and social protection system, especially for immigrants who are vulnerable to the pandemic, but also on the front line of the response in healthcare, home care, and agriculture. The Barrister Juni and Irene Menakaya Foundation is standing on this to discuss way forward for improvement of quality and inclusive education for community classroom in developing countries. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that update and for giving us such wonderful report. At this time, coming to speak to us on the situation and education in African communities, we will now be hearing from HRH Prince Dr. Osita. He's the president of the Sub-Sahara Open University. Prince Dr. Osita. Your mic is muted, sir. Just unmute your mic, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Devon. I am so happy to be here. Now, I start by saying that Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest rates of education exclusion. Over 1/5 of children between the ages of 6 and 11 are out of school. And furthermore, 1/3 of youth between ages of about 12 and 14 don't attend schools. So education in pre-colonial Africa was informal. Apprenticeship model dominated the learning process. Children and younger members of each household and society learned from older members of their tribe, household, and community. In Africa, 72 million children are not attending school, and this is very troubling. Busy working at home, battling myriads of adverse situations, including gender issues, religion, war, and health. All these affect the African child's education. And now about 37 million children receive extremely poor education on the continent. So what is going on? Community classrooms. Let's look at the situation of education in Africa, focusing on community classrooms. Nigeria, Mongunu in Nigeria, there's a child, Modan Umar, he's 13 years old. He dreams of becoming a doctor or a policeman or a lawyer. This little man from Northeast Nigeria nurses huge dreams. Now it's looking like the man's dream won't come to reality because his parents cannot afford this dream anymore, and the pandemic is not making it easy for him. Nigeria, Katsina State. Nigeria has a vast coastline of river tributary, yet insufficient access to clean water contributes to millions of deaths in the country. 1 in 7 children die in Nigeria before they reach age 5. Millions of deaths from waterborne illnesses. Hygiene is being made a central part of the curriculum in schools, and community classrooms have come to the rescue. Uganda. Community classroom project began with the population's demand. The target is to rebuild the St. Mary's School in the village of Kikajo. St. Mary's School was built by missionaries and it became dilapidated through the years. So the current space, in the current learning space, is an alarming situation. So by launching that project, it became the search for the meaning of education for the community. Work based on community social psychology in teachers training, family and community education, and creating the possibility for community classrooms to change the course of events for Kijajo. Uganda too. More than 38 million children in sub-Saharan Africa are without school. They don't go to school. Many countries have initiated programs guaranteeing a free education, but chronic classroom shortages plague these communities. So even when there are scholarships for programs, for academic programs, still these kids do not go to school because there are no classrooms. So this lack means that there's need in Uganda to construct enough schools to meet the demand. Otherwise, children walk miles to get to a school in neighboring communities. They scribble their lessons in the dirt under a tree in order to learn. But Community Classroom Project has come to rescue primary level academy for 325 pupils in rural Uganda is on. And this in the classrooms are replete with all facilities, including recreation. Tanzania, Community Classroom Project in Tanzania, replete with school and child, has come to save a situation where almost 40% of girls get married before 15, and 85% of women cannot read and write. They see community education as their future. And then because of that, there is overwhelming gratitude and cordiality from all the children. They accept this program and they're willing to support it. So working every day with the local teams, they are doing their best to provide the best education, and then with a better education, there's a chance for a better future. Tanzania, too. New community classrooms in Karama Primary School in Tanzania is up and going now. Building classrooms in a primary school can take a lot of time. But if you go to Tanzania, because of the spirit and because of the need for them to get educated, you may never have seen a construction of a public building happen in less than 9 months until you arrive in Tanzania. Enthusiasm means speed, means support, and means that they are ready to go the whole 9 yards to make it happen. Tanzania 3. New teaching approaches improve primary education in the country. Now is the time to create a thinking African. Before now, they were all robots. Africans were created by a curriculum that makes them automated clerk, factory workers, messengers, houseboys, and farm boys, etc. But now is the time for Africa to catch up with the rest of the world. Now is the time to start teaching students to critique what is being presented to them. And community classroom is taking the lead in Tanzania. Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire is the world's, Africa's largest producer of cocoa, and produces 40% of cocoa all over the world. So from cocoa fields to classroom in Cote d'Ivoire, things are changing. Inukofikro is an example because it's a farming community about 20 kilometers from San Pedro. The second largest port in the country. The main crop is cocoa. Raw beans are grown, harvested, and exported just the way they are. So when they're exported, countries that are cocoa producing countries like Switzerland and co transform these into chocolate bars and send them back to Africa. So Cote d'Ivoire's cocoa production accounts approximately for that 40%, but the country is still poor. Community classroom now is beginning to inject in-country value addition to make sure that the country earns more from the export of cocoa. Niger Republic. This is very peculiar because improving the education of girls in the Niger Republic has been the priority of the country for the last 40 years. But one international organization, Plan International, advocates deploying community schools to sensitize girls before they get married. The major problem there is that girls from the age of 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 are forced into marriage instead of being sent to school. So Plan International is sensitizing girls before they are lured into that, and then working with religious and traditional leaders, communities, parents, and teachers. They are using the new plan launched to improve the education of girls in Niger to get more girls into school and to create a way for them not to be lured into early marriages further. Ghana. Ghana has one of the highest preschool enrollment rates in sub-Saharan Africa, but many children are not learning in school. The challenge is that many teachers are not trained in the methods proven to help young people learn and reach their full potential. So Accra, teacher training programs with improved early childhood education and community classrooms have come together to begin to win this battle exponentially. But what we are doing in Sub-Saharan Open University now is to collate all of this and make sure that we put them forward to the glory of the continent. And all the countries that were mentioned here now have started to take a cue, while the university is working with partners all over the world to make sure that this happens. The reference for this presentation is on the next slide, and I thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prince Dr. Osita. So this here, it's a video presentation on the update of the education that is being offered there in Nigeria under the Irene Menakaya School. So just sit back, relax, grab your pen and papers, and at the same time, you can grab your checkbooks. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and I welcome you to another edition of Community Report. I might sound a little bit down, not agile, my normal self. Yes, it's because of what I saw. My name is Yunusa Gabriel Enemali, and our Community Report today is coming to you live from LGEA Primary School, Aku, in Ankpa local government. The policy of this government says when you see something, say something, and that is what Community Report stands for. And of course, SDG goal number 4 talks about quality education. But I'm going to let you know, or let you see, whether what we're going to be seeing now or talking about is even up to what they call quality education. Now behind me is a class, but come so that we can tell the story better. Wow. Now this is class 6A of LGEA Primary School. Now what is the problem? The problem is that, look at it. Does this look like a place where people can sit down and learn? Can we get anything called standard of education from this place? The answer is no. The zinc or the roof was a contribution made by the community. Now, they were so tired, they cannot even take care of themselves. How much more of taking care of or rebuilding this community? Primary school. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you a little bit about the school. The school was established in the year 1974. Between 74 and now, of course, do the math yourself or the calculation, you know how many years gone by. And I'm very, very sure that our co-sons and daughters must have passed through this school, because this is the only school or primary school they have around here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, look at the class. Look at this. Look at this. Now there's a hole. I was told it's a rabbit, akoto. Rabbit, that's what they kill from here. Comes in here. This is meant to occupy the pupil. But at the end of the day, it is animals that stays there. Come here, so that we can tell our story better. So, community report is in line with the 17 SDG goal. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is supposed to be the headmaster's office. I don't know. Okay, it's open. All right, please come, show them. This is supposed to be the HM's office. Look at it. Can you see it? Who is that human being that will want to come and stay here? Look at those books on the ground that says Kogi State Primary Education Board. These are supposed to be in drawer or in a wardrobe or somewhere kept, properly kept. But today, they're on the ground being eaten by termites. Oh no, it's so pathetic. Ladies and gentlemen, come so that you understand their pain. But does this community have representation in any of this government? And if they choose to keep quiet because of their own selfishness, that means they have actually compromised the educational standard of their people in the rural community. This is class 5. Ladies and gentlemen, this is class 5. Look at it. No roof, nothing. The people have abandoned it. This is class 4. Can you see class 4? The community can no longer take care of it. Oh. This is class 6. Class 3. This is class 3. This is class 2. Can you see this? And this is class 1. Look at all of this. Now, the whole of this is as useless as rubbish. Because you know why? Nobody is occupying it. No student or pupil is occupying it. Sir, I have the HM with me. Good morning, sir. Please come closer. How are you?
Fine.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling fine.
He is even looking tired, discouraged, even regretting why did he went to read education to become a teacher. How are you feeling?
Actually, so I'm doing fine. I see you have earlier seen everything.
Yes.
I built in a school compound, so we have a problem in our school here.
I've not seen anybody. Today is Monday,
Mm.
and they're supposed to be in school. What happened?
They happen is that is a building that you see
Yes.
make our children run away from here to other school. And then some classes in the town.
Yes.
The course also. That classes bring a problem that our school cannot stay suitable. Even that problem alone, that crisis discourage our community.
Okay.
As they do help before. Now they are not sent to do that. And
Okay,
then
sir.
we want your help to, as God bring you here, you are going back is to go and show them, tell them the problem we have, especially the building, the pupils here. It is because of that building that they are not sufficient. So maybe if God so kind and that can be happen, the government can, the excellence, our excellence, Mohammed Barr
And Yaya Bello.
and Yaya Bello, they put more effort to this school.
Then let me help you. This man is tired. He's so discouraged. His salary, if you hear, your dog at home will not even use it as food. They can't use it to buy the dog's feed. But ladies and gentlemen, let me show you another thing. Now that the people have abandoned this, they have resorted to using UBEG, Universal Basic Education Building. Look at it. So, Even the universal basic education, that is class 6A and B. Now they have converted it to 5 and 6. Now for the rest classes to be used. Now come, even that, or even at that. Come in. Even at that, this cannot be called an infrastructure that can contain pupils. Please show them inside the block or the room. Show them. Can you see this? This is the floor. Show them the board. Show them the board. Show them the board. Show them the floor. Termite is eating it and it can collapse anytime. This is supposed to be UBEC that will be hosting GSS 1 to 3. Now that the idea is for them to finish from that primary school and start their secondary school here. Now the primary school is collapsed. Now this is the secondary school. Would you, and I ask you again, would you allow your child to come here? Now, it's just like that, so there's no point even going through all of that. There is no one single chair. The headmaster sits on a plank. Headmaster sits on a plank, for God's sake. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I've talked enough. The story has, showed itself. Now, this is what I want from you. You've done it before. You are going to support me. We're going to support this community to share this until it gets to the right quarter so that something urgent is done. SDG goal number 4 talks about quality education. SDG goal number 17 talks about partnership to achieving that goal. I know we can do it. You can do it. You are from Aku community, whether male or female, and you are in an office. You have the contact and connectivity. Please show this. Let's rebuild our community before something do all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to use this opportunity to call Nigeria Cares. Please, here's a problem. Kogi Cares, here's a problem. SDG, here's a problem. Obola Rural Community Foundation, here is a problem. Let's wake up. Let's rally around together and see that this community is saved. Community report is uncensored. Community report is unedited. As we see it, we say it. There is no political undertone. All we are saying is that let our community come back to life. This man, how many years have you served?
I have served up to 30 years.
He has served 30 years and very soon he's going to retire. Yes. Is he going to retire into more poverty or into worry and pain, and after a while they say he's dead? Ladies and gentlemen, there's so much to do. Now you are interested in supporting or sponsoring our community report, please call me on 07054 000 395. I call it again, 07054 000 395. International communities, please, here's a problem. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where I sign out for today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Wow. Wow. I know that is very heartrending to see. And the Irene Menakaya, they've been a great help. They've been doing a very good work. They recently had graduation, which Dr. Ada can tell you more about later on to the end. But the need is great. I know many of you here, and those of you watching as well, if you have children or grandchildren, nieces, nephews, any little child that you care about, you wouldn't want them to go to school in such deplorable state. So to the end, I am personally going to be calling on everyone, and Dr. Adam knows me. I am the type, I lead by example. So at the end, I am going to give everyone a local, for those of you that are here in the US, I'm going to give you a Cash App. I'm going to give you a bank account or Zelle, PayPal, whatever it is, or a telephone number, so that we can be of assistance, we can be of help to these children, because they might not be your children by blood, but there's someone else's children, and if you can feel for them, then imagine how your own would feel if you had to allow yours to go through that. A lot of us, we're privileged, we're blessed to have very great conditions for our children, but to see that, it's something that we cannot sit idly by and watch. And then we sit here on this wonderful panel and we smile and we say nice words. I know every one of us have a story when it comes to going to school, but at the same time, we have chosen to be agents of change. So let's do just that. With that being said, I'm going to ask His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Denis Antoine, the Vice President of the 69th UN General Assembly, to come and speak to us a little bit on the United Nations agenda and the community classroom. Ambassador Dr. Antoine, over to you, sir.
Thank you, moderator, Dr. Bannister. My fellow ambassadors, distinguished colleagues and panelists, and all participants, and a very special salute to our convener of this second Barr Juni and Irene Menakaya Legacy Lecture, Dr. Ada Okika. Now, history teaches us that the lives of great men and women remind us that we can make our contributions to humanity unequal to any. Now, today we recall the life and legacy of Barr Juni and Irene Menakaya through this conference, because they strove in their time to make a difference by their involvement in community education. But more than that, theirs is still a living legacy through the continued dedication to education by their sons and daughters. Today, however, based on the current hysteria and turmoil in our world, in the grip of a pandemic, it is obvious that we would begin, and we should begin, to reimagine what is education. You know, I sat here and I was wondering, is global learning in crisis? Or are we at a juncture to reimagine what is education? And I keep asking myself, do we have a gap in learning? Or is there an opening for new knowledge? You know, and I listened very closely to the statistics that were shared. We can all accept that the modern vision of education contributes to enabling upward social mobility. And by increasing access to education, unmistakable measure of progress have been made toward erasing poverty. That's in record. Education has done that. It has erased, it has lifted us out of poverty. There are statistics which show that school enrollment rates all over at all levels in the past decade rose, particularly for girls. But despite the UN agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals to have every child in school and learning by 2030, there are still 260 million children who don't go to primary schools. So without urgent action, within the next decade, about 825 million children will not have the most basic education skills necessary for jobs as we know them in the future. So we have to begin to think about jobs in a different context. And that number is nearly 1/5 of the global population of that age group that I have mentioned. Now, the agenda for education for all is about community classrooms. And remember, if we're to talk about the UN agenda, there is the Constitution of the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, known as UNESCO, which came into effect in 1946. There were 20 countries involved at the time. Now, today, there are 195 member states and 11 associate members. So you see, the United Nations and UNESCO is reaching into the world. The main objective of UNESCO is to contribute to the peace and security in the world by programming collaboration among nations through education, science, culture, and communication. And the purpose of that is to foster respect for justice, the rule of law, human rights, and fundamental freedoms that are affirmed for the world's people without any distinction of race, sex, language, or religion, and that is according to the United Nations Charter. So, to fulfill the mandates, it is important that we are reminded that UNESCO performs 5 functions. And these 5 functions of UNESCO, which includes prospective studies and education, science, culture, communication for tomorrow's world. You hear the word tomorrow's world, the future. And the advancement, transfer, sharing of knowledge through research, training, teaching activities, and then standard setting, actions for the preparation and adoption of internal instruments, and they make statutory recommendations. Now, they also look at expertise through technical cooperation to member states for the development of policies. So we're talking now about harmonization. When the UN does something in New York, in its other offices, it is not for the books and for us to read. It is to be transferred. It is to be harmonized. It is to go back home. So it is almost as if each country now needs an SDG 4. Each country, not the UN, not the book and the paper that we read. Every country must take that into their policies and harmonize, make the laws and local policies in line with what the consensus that was reached at the United Nations to take place to change our world. So the exchange of specialized information is a critical aspect of the function of educators as UNESCO has prescribed. Now, to fulfill its purpose for, UNESCO has gone on to institute its Institute of Statistics to gather global statistics in the field of education, science, technology, innovation, culture, and communication. Now, this institute is the official source of internationally compatible data used to monitor progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals and the key targets to science, culture, communication, and gender equality. Now, we must be reminded to achieve the SDG, data is a must. So we have to rely on data. SDG 4 and its targets, as we all rotely, reveals, ensures inclusive and equitable quality education and to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Something happened in 2020. Education was struck with a bad blow. COVID-19 pandemic spread across the globe. Most countries have announced temporary closure of schools, impacting more than 91% of all students worldwide. Now, research shows that the gap in education has been widened. Now, we talk about a gap in education. I will come back to that. By April 2020, now 1.6 million children and youth were out of school, and nearly 369 million children who rely on meals needed to look at other sources for the daily nutrition, because the school feeding program, this is becoming a little bit impacting. Never have so many children been out of school at the same time, disrupting learning as we know it and upsetting lives, especially for the most vulnerable and marginalized. Now, the global pandemic has, far-reaching consequences that may jeopardize gains that we talked about as the SDGs went into almost 5 years, 2015 to 2020. And so we must now contemplate on education from disruption to recovery. Disruption to recovery. After a little more than 1 year into COVID-19 pandemic, close to half the world's students are still affected by partial or full school closure. And over 100 million additional children fall below the minimum proficiency level of reading because of the health crisis that we're in. So, prioritizing education recovery is crucial to avoid generational catastrophe. And that must be the preoccupation of the global community. Now, we must go back to UNESCO and its supporting work in countries in the efforts to mitigate the impact of school closures, to address learning losses and adapt education systems, particularly for vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. Now, CITADA is well positioned to contribute to the visual chain. Now, the visual chain of thinking for a modern vision of global future. Now, this visual chain is almost like visualizing where you're going. It's almost like seeing what happens after the cloud of the pandemic ceases. So to mobilize and support learning communities to work, UNESCO is establishing what is called Global Education Coalition, and that is done in 160 member states with emphasis on 3 central themes: gender, connectivity, the teachers, and this requires global support. Remember, gender, connectivity, and teachers. Teachers are people too. They are learners too, and they have been affected. Let us remember that teachers do research, they go to school. So teachers are learners, and they're learning to advance children's learning has also been disrupted. So we have a compounded situation. However, beyond the pandemic, there are several grim circumstances and why children are not in school. And remember sometimes we forget that before the pandemic, there was attack on education. There was what you call the attack on schools. And we can remember before the pandemic, more than 34 countries over a 5-year period had a lot of disruption in education where the schools were attacked. Now, the global coalition, which is to protect education from attacks, said, and I quote here, buildings were bombed, damaged, or used for armed forces, sometimes making them inaccessible for students. Now that happened before pandemic, but today it is still happening. We can all pay attention right now to what's happening in parts of the world where there is chaos. Now there is something which UNESCO, if we talk about the UN agenda, the Global Coalition to protect education from attack. We see that the Safe School Declaration, a commitment to protect schools from attack and military occupation, was launched in 2015 and has now been signed by 101 countries. So you see the UN agenda is at work. If we are researching and looking, we can see there are 101 countries participating in this commitment. Now, we used to talk about child labor. It's still happening. We can't forget that those issues that affect education as we know it still goes on. Then comes climate change and its impact, natural disasters. Now we can recall the South Asia flood of 2017, which destroyed or damaged 18,000 schools and put 1.8 million children out of school. And we can't overlook the plight of Haiti, the volcanoes in the Eastern Caribbean, child marriage, the impact of climate change, conflicts. Now let's talk about conflict. Almost 1 in 5 children live in countries affected by conflict, and many of them denied an education as a result. We see the grim realities going on in Afghanistan. So let us be mindful that pre-pandemic issues still prevail. Let's talk about disabilities. Children with disabilities are more likely to miss out on school. Let's talk about funding. Lack of funding at a local and national and international levels has a huge effect on the number of children who are in school and on quality and not receiving quality education. And we can go on, but we cannot forget gender. The UN estimates that about 130 million girls between the age of 6 and 17 they're out of school, and 15 million girls of primary school age, half of them in sub-Saharan Africa, will never enter classrooms. Girls are 4 times more likely to be out of school than boys from the same background. Often, girls are marginalized and are out of school simply because they are girls. And it is not the cultural norm for them to be educated. This has nothing to do with a crisis brought about by a pandemic. It is a pandemic of, I call, cultural absurdity. So journey to school is another issue, which raises the community classroom. That space where the students must feel a sense of belonging. It is a safe space, and as the name suggests, a group wherein the students and teachers coexist. Now, a simple walk to school can be extremely unsafe for many children, even today. And many parents refuse to send their children, particularly the girls, to school in case they're harassed and exploited. And many children in remote communities must also make the most unimaginable and dangerous journey every day to access education. In an era, for example, of learning, there is still need for broadband access to reach underserved areas. We're talking about connectivity. There are places where there is no electricity to connect. So in closing, I would make the following statement. Today, we cannot just talk about a modern vision of a global future for education. We must act. So let us all get on board toward 2030. Let's get this 9-year ride to see what happens. Let us begin by embracing the best practices to change the lives of all students who attend school beyond their own space. Let us join in contributing to the cause of education in every country and every continent. And let us strive to create modern learning hubs with visionary leaders. Now, we have to talk about who teaches, who are the leaders of learning, how a teacher learns affect how a student learns. Now, with a fresh knowledge, we need a fresh knowledge of what is education, with strategies for learning that contains compassion, so that when we measure success, it will be reaching far beyond and surpassing the SDG 4 and all its targets. I thank you for listening, and I am very pleased to be associated with this illustrious group of panelists and humanists. You are very, very well received, and I am pleased to be here, and I'm listening. Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Dr. Dennis. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The pandemic didn't really, let me be careful in my words here. The pandemic didn't, let's say, cause the education system to be the way it is. The pandemic just show it up. That's what it did. It just show it up. So, we love to say, whatever you sweep under the rug, someday the rug is going to be removed. Well, the pandemic just removed the rug. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Antoine. Thank you. Next, we'll be hearing from another brilliant mind. He's going to speak to us on global learning crisis and impending havoc to community education. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the former ambassador of Suriname to China, His Excellency Dr. Lloyd Lucien Pinas. His Excellency, over to you, sir. You can unmute your mic.
Yeah. You can hear me now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Right. So I think it's morning at your side. Here is already almost evening. I'm currently in Holland. I'm from Suriname. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. I'm in Holland, so I just speak Dutch as we do in Suriname. But for this meeting, I will have to address you in English. So I want to thank you for having me. The topic you gave me to talk about, I don't know how to fill it in, but I will begin with introducing you to Suriname. We are used to calling ourselves the small United Nations because the population of Suriname is made up of people from all over the world. So if I would be anywhere else in the world, I would also feel as if I am in Suriname. Let me just give you an idea why I agree with the expression of small United Nations. Okay, so we are in South America, a very small population compared to the size of the country. We are not yet a half. Yeah, we are over a half million. Sorry, I'm used to saying that we are just a little small place. And the land area is 160,000 square kilometers, of which 90% is forest. So most people live in the coastal region. We have the native people, the Amerindian, as we call them, the indigenous. So you know why the word Indian is there? Because of Columbus, his invention. After Columbus, we have European who came in. The European brought the Africans, the Afro-Surinamese, as you can see, a representative here. Then 1863 came, the end of the abolition of slavery. And after that, the Indians from India were brought in as indentured laborers. But Suriname is a bit different from the other countries, such as in the Caribbean, because we were a colony of Holland, and Holland was also controlling Indonesia. So they brought people in from Indonesia. That was in 1890. And they also became part of Suriname. I skipped something. Just remind myself that I skipped something. I skipped telling you that Chinese were brought in 1853 from that point on and further in history. So I will try to approach the topic of education and mix it up with culture, because me being in China for many years, over 25 years, I've not been the ambassador of Suriname for 25 years. Okay, don't misunderstand that. I sort of got to understand through the use of language and the way of thinking a different approach to analyzing things, with input from Asia, input from Chinese education. And that's what I would like to share with you today. I will not make it too long, otherwise I will spoil the discussion and everything that comes by blocking all the other speakers. But let me try to be brief and cut into it. From what I'm telling you about Suriname, so people from all over the world, especially Asia, are in Suriname. Our population is almost as the situation in the world. 60% of world's population is living currently in Asia, and 60% of our population is from Asian descent. So that's one of the points. I've listened to the presentations, and I've noticed that we look at the problems as they are, But I think we forget that problems don't just come from one day to the next. It takes time to build up and actually become a problem. So, in that aspect, I would say that right now we look at the world as it is today with many beautiful things. There are also ugly things, many, but let's look at the beautiful things. We are living in the age of information. This requires us to have an eye and an ear for the other voices, for the other places in the world. I recall when I decided many years ago to go to China. All friends and relatives, they were all puzzled, like, what is wrong with you? Why are you going there? I cannot explain it precisely, but I should say that I don't regret it. Okay. So, what I would like to bring to your attention, and I hope that you would take it to heart and try to see if it is of any help, of any use to you in your way of making your analysis, thinking about situations, trying to resolve difficulties. All right. So, in the Chinese language, it is quite interesting that words are built up of parts, right? Let me give you an example before I cannot come back to it. Let's say we're talking about culture and we're talking about tradition. It is very normal for the Chinese person to say culture, 文化, and tradition is 传统. But you just shift it around, okay? But when you shift it around, it becomes something else, right? Then you're not just saying cultural tradition, but you're saying traditional culture, and that is something completely different. All right. So it gets you to look at the same words in a different position. They take a different function. And because they have a different function, the whole meaning goes deeper than you would normally try to understand it. Okay. So this is what I took at heart, and it got me to look at culture. What is culture? Many scholars who have looked at this uh, term and given many definitions. If you start reading up on the lecture, I think you will leave it halfway because it is so much. But the beauty of it is that I think we are all familiar with early European scholars like Mr. Ockham from the Occam Racer, who tells you that the simplest explanation is the best. So when you look at culture with all the definitions from all angles and all disciplines, the simple definition is that it is a way of life, nothing else. So wouldn't it be nice to have one single definition for culture, taking all the confusion away? And especially in the setting where I come from Suriname, we have people from all different places from all over the world. And sometimes we use the expression, because in Suriname we speak Sranantongo, like a local lingua franca. We say Brumchijari, like a yard full of different flowers. But the important thing is to understand that culture just has one definition, that is a way of life. Okay? So if everybody has to follow a way of life or has a way of life, we're to think about what is life. I'm not going into any religious definition. Please don't uh, because I recently had a discussion where I sort of had that dilemma. But what is life? Life is just you have your daily doing, and there are problems to be solved. From every minute, hour, second, you need to solve problems. Okay, so it is all about problem solving. You just have to solve the problem. And understanding that you're solving problems, you can uh, look at a problem as first being quantitative and also qualitative, right? So we all did research. We know that you have this research approach where you do the quantitative and qualitative method. So solving problems is applying a way of thinking to solve your problem. So, not making it too long, I just look at the word that we like so much, we love so much, we call it technology, which, looking into the Chinese way of building of words, it comes down to technical logic. So when you hear technical logic, you don't look at the adjective, look at the last part, look at the logic part. It's a way of thinking. So when we talk about technology, we're actually talking about something that you cannot touch. It is the logical thinking that you apply a certain way of, doing that logic, the technique that you apply to that logic that gives you the result, the technology that you then need to solve the problems you're facing, the problems you come across. Yeah. So in that way, when we are looking at education, education is not solely the activity that takes place in the school setting. Education is culture in the sense that you are brought up in at home, okay? So you are taught by your parents, the people around you, and you are learning from them. So these two activities, teaching and learning, that's what happens when we talk about culture from one generation to the next. That's how it goes. Now, the difference in the cultures in the different places is just the way in which this education is taking place. Yeah, so we can see for ourselves the way in which the parents are preparing their children for life and the amount of strength, attention, and yeah, all that they put into it, the dedication that they have to bring up their children and the appreciation that takes place, right? So in this way, I say culture equals education equals technology. And when we understand this, then the divisions we are making, they will fade away, they will fall out. And we will come to understand that many of the problems that we are, envisioning, that we see, that we create, they are mostly unnecessary. So I think that by saying this, I hope to already indicate the mindset that we would need, that we would build up to move forward in this new day and age where technology is, I mean, the internet technology, the information technology is so wide available. Yeah, I have been looking at the presentation, the community report. I'm trying to be careful not to, use words that will not land well. But what I'm trying to say is that it did not happen overnight for the school to be in that stage. Um, I look at it as in the same way as I view uh, developments in Suriname. The things did not happen overnight. It takes time for it to get to that stage where it is right now. And one of the blames we can lay on ourselves is that our understanding of the concept of culture sometimes is blocking us, is hindering us, is locking us down to keep to ourselves. It is all about making use of the understanding that the world is a global village. And I'm sure that with a little bit of an effort, we can easily find like-minded people. And that's what I believe that the United Nations and all these international organizations with goodwill and good heart, such as this forum, are trying to explain to us. So when I received the invitation to participate, I looked into the information available, and I was moved. And I also believe that the invitation came through Dr. Antoine, and we have had many of sort of this kind of talks and chats when we were in Beijing, because he was also in Beijing. Maybe he did not reveal that to you. I do believe that he picked up a lot of Chinese there, but I think you can test him later on his level of Chinese. All right, so and also uh, teach you some of that. And we all know that China has a very long history, and the Chinese language is, I believe, the only ancient language with a writing system that survived. And also, I'm not sure if I will put this forward, if you agree with me or not, but the technology of language is the writing system, is a writing system. Okay, so when we look at the world map, the map of the world, I believe you can notice that the places where there are languages who do not have their own writing system, the level of development is rather falling behind. Yeah. I'm not talking about adopting another language. I'm talking about the people living in that place and having their own language. Actually, I should be the last one to talk about this, because in Suriname we speak Dutch and all other languages. We do not use the language of the native people. I have been clear in making my point, and looking forward to have further discussions with you, and I hope that this brief introduction to the idea of education linking to culture, linking to technology, can find a way and trigger you into looking into the non-conventional definition that we have been using over the years. So I believe that I should leave it for now. And oh, my telephone, sorry. And then I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Dr. Lloyd, former Ambassador of Suriname to China. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you very much to you as well, Dr. Antoine, for making this wonderful connection here and having him here to speak with us today. Thank you very much to both of you gentlemen. Thank you. Moving on. So from here onwards, the speakers for this next sections here, each speaker will have 10 minutes. When you have 2 minutes remaining, I will let you know that you have 2 minutes remaining. So we're now moving into global learning crisis and the impending havoc to community education, but we're going to look at it from a reflection point of view. So coming to speak to us on situations in community education, we have our early child education associate professor, education director of inclusive ECE and EE programs from the United Nations and also United Nations representatives, OMEP. Please help me welcome Dr. Jessica N. Essery. I don't want to bite my tongue and pronounce that college name, please. So you can please go ahead and do so.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. Greetings, dear leaders. The esteemed interest and expertise in this group will be highly valued in addressing, and has been already so highly valued in addressing the shared global learning crisis today or this evening, wherever you might be. Thank you for the honor to speak with you. My name is Dr. Jess Essery. Please call me Jess. I am a United Nations representative for the World Organization for Early Childhood Education, known as OMEP. In OMEP, we understand that early childhood education is critical for the achievement of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as reflected in the UN Secretary General's call to action. To bridge the learning gap during this pandemic, we must first affirm that SDG 4 education has an intertwined influence on our ability to reach the other SDG goals, including SDG 2 and 3, with a focus on healthy nutrition and health indicators, as well as meeting the basic rights of children in SDG 16. As our esteemed speakers from today's presentation have so eloquently uplifted to our attention, children deserve the best our communities can offer. At the core of this united message, again, at the core, we understand the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, known in short as the UNCRC, is an international treaty which recognizes each child as an active citizen participant with sovereign rights, rights that we are all advocating for now. Yet it will take extensive action from community-based programs to meet the needs of young children who have compromised rights. One right being their right to education. Today, we call on the community to create sustainable interventions. Every sector has a role, from the media to corporations, religious leaders, and all the community stakeholders are involved. Studies have found that compassion can overcome trauma, and that caring guidance and responsive support can help children avoid psychological disruptions and adjust better despite exposure to atrocities. This means that children's silent behavior, sitting still for hours in school, is not the goal in education. In school, children must be guided as active participants who can gain a sense of belonging in the classroom, in the community, in their nations, and in the world. As communities meet children's right for education with innovative support, we must also ask children if we are meeting those needs. Then, in beautiful opportunities such as this event today, we must continue to share the best ideas we have to offer to support their physical, academic, emotional, and social development, as well as their autonomy and their role in teaching us. This is no small ask in a world where COVID-19 has been a paramount topic, which offers little reprieve for the education of young minds who must believe in the future. We offer hope for the future. We offer hope through education and care, in which the child's family, the child's first teacher, are our partners in education. You see, anyone can be a valuable teacher, but the most valuable professional educators teach for learning. They do not assume that people are cared for and that they are learning something. Teaching for learning involves assessing if we're actually helping or not. That means that we must first observe, ask, and involve everyone in the process. What are we going to learn from this global crisis? We should learn that school is the highest point in every community. When a school suffers, when it closes even for some small amount of time, the community suffers too. Educators remind us of the vast power we have to constantly share our knowledge and skills with children. Educators warn us of the crisis of mother language lost, as globally we've lost more than half of the languages in the world over the last decade. This means that we have lost a vast amount of knowledge, which was specialized and situated with rare words, concepts, and associated skills. The international community is responding to the loss of animals, as we're all aware of extinction rates and prevention needs, yet the often too invisible endangered knowledge can be found in rural areas and remote communities where global marketing of mass products is not the norm. How do we preserve the rare endangered skills? Relying only on the school to provide education is like only building a dam to fix a major problem. If the very best educational practices are not the most treasured aspects of our culture, if it is not shared with every person in that town, the school, the dam, which was built to address ignorance and misconceptions and build human potential, will eventually break. The message in the home is the bridge which is needed to preserve rare funds of knowledge and to communicate in a way that learning becomes as appreciated as each religion's most famous culinary delight. For example, when we think of our favorite culinary delight, do we appreciate education just as much? Our local communities send messages to children about what our culture values. May those messages be readily communicated with our spoken words as well as reflected with our silent actions. May those messages communicate that our daily educational experiences are as necessary to us as eating, that new insights are as delightful as our favorite meal, and our consistent compassionate care is as steady and vital as our very own heartbeats are vital to our existence. Many, many, many children in migration are exposed to extreme poverty, where inequalities, exclusion, and violence are prevalent. And many, many, many children living in wealthy nations may still sit silently, experience school which is only involving the teaching of letters and numbers and isolation, without conversation of how children can be active and caring from the start. We have to open the school doors and value the right things in schooling. When a baby smiles, we should praise them for giving so much kindness to others. When they speak, we should listen as though they are the greatest philosopher or politician. And when they cry, we should discuss the solution to their problem with them, how we are doing things with them, and our happiness to help them. For everything they participate in will determine how they treat others. We must raise our leaders to care about others from the moment they are first babies in our arms. And we cannot wait until their youth to begin to engage them in community activities. We cannot allow the current gap in research literature pertaining to civic engagement and community belonging to be found. It's only amongst youth now, and we need more research for pertaining to young children. We must find ways to safely engage them in civic engagement now. Early childhood education is recognized as a sovereign right in almost every country in the world, but it is not just a matter of access and post-pandemic recovery. In order to thrive as well as survive, we must have quality education now. We must help expert educators spread their pedagogical practices. This is what's happening today by attending this meeting. We must put our money into local productive, sustainable education associations as freely as we put our money into the roof above our own heads. We must be involved in governmental decision-making to support child rights, teacher salaries, and community resources, and we cannot fail to provide children with access to the health services they need. Finally, we should invest in caring for a teacher's well-being and professional needs in order for them to care about others. Recall, for instance, that in an airplane emergency, adults are told to put the oxygen mask on themselves before the child, because children need adults to be their support. They cannot only look to other children for guidance. Yes, caregivers' mental health is vital to the compassionate education the child will receive. Yes, a young child's ability to thrive in education depends on the dedicated care of all the adults in their lives. Now I ask, who is putting the oxygen mask on the pilot in the emergency? According to Part 91 of the FAA General Operating and Flight Rules, pilots have 5 seconds or less to get their emergency mask on with one hand. Right now, during this international pandemic, our great teachers are continuously behind the scenes as they pilot education for society, operating an ongoing emergency, getting their oxygen mask on in under 5 seconds, over and over and over again and again and again, to support extensive and taxing emotional, social, academic, and physical needs of their students. And when we listen to them, we hear that it is an emergency for teachers and their students. Our most empathetic teachers are those who feel what the community feels, and they dive into supporting the community and teachers in times of trauma, but this work may cause great secondary stress. They're often the first to give their money, their time, their emotions, their actions, often doing things for free, materials, opinions, and so many other resources. They're so incredibly inspiring to those who educate and to those who care for children. We can't simplify or underestimate the work of these teachers as though they are robots in a factory, because they too will go running home to hide with their families, never to fly, never again to pilot the educational experiences of each child to reach their potential. We need the most compassionate educators to feel empowered by our support for their vital work through our dedicated sharing of financial material resources, as well as vital access to caring mentors, compassionate colleagues, and community members, as well as other priceless human resources. They need our support now. They need our listening ears, and they need to see it coming from every local and international stakeholder, and every person is an educational stakeholder. Most public policies fail to address young children, and as young children cannot vote, they are often forgotten. Evidence of government policy failures is easy to see by looking around at countless public spaces with children, considering the way children struggle to use, adult-sized bathrooms, and they're just, unfortunately, children aren't considered widely. Early childhood citizenship is a core of our ability to provide any successful recovery plan. Government policies must place young children at an equal and equitable level with all people, and consider the access of quality, holistic early childhood education as a non-negotiable human right. Schools must be inclusive of children's basic care needs. This is the only way we'll achieve the very best outcomes for inclusive education. Despite each member state's ability to prioritize and meet these needs, and inequalities and inequities persist within and across nations. This is starkly evident in data on availability, accessibility, and the quality of early childhood education and care policies. According to UNICEF, more than 175 million children, around 50% of pre-primary age children globally, continue to be denied their right to have an early childhood education. And that involves care as well.
You have 2 minutes remaining.
Thank you. According to each state's obligation to promote, protect, and restore child rights, OMEP wants to highlight certain crucial recommendations to respond to this pandemic. Number 1, in accordance with United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, apply the principle of best interest of the child as the primary consideration in the definition of public policies. So we must refer to the UNCRC. Number 2, include children's perspectives in all matters that affect them. Children can react to the events that impact their lives. By amplifying children's voices, societies can overcome traditional views, which traditionally have focused more on attention to the needs of adults. Number 3, promote the participation of diverse stakeholders in investment decision-making and program monitoring processes. Number 4, provide reliable, meaningful, and disaggregated information on the situation of early childhood to design rights-based approaches and inclusive knowledge-based public policies. Number 5, prioritize investments based on a rights approach and protect budgets committed to inclusive societies and the protection of all children and families. During this speech, I've been saying that children need to participate in providing feedback on all things which impact them. So in closure, when my son woke up, he asked to listen to my nearly final, or he asked what I was doing, and I asked if he would like to listen to my nearly final draft of this speech. He kindly agreed, maybe not knowing what he was getting himself into. I proceeded to read my notes from this talk, a bit extensive for his young age of 5, perhaps, but no, I needed his advice. I began to make brief edits and additions based on just his simple reactions as my audience member. Here was Giles' response when I asked for his reflection on what I shared. He said, "Mom, you're talking about helping people starts with helping their hearts. God helps the babies. The people have to help them to go to the doctor, have fun, and help them get food." Then I ask, do people have to help other people learn? Should I write learn too? "Mom, you're gonna ruin my words. Learning is what I said. Have fun." Even as an expert who teaches play-based learning, I had to be reminded from my child that when we are teaching our children as active decision makers and participants, a mutually shared educational experience, there will be no difference between learning and fun. Also, I'm here today to tell you, there should also be no difference in care and education. These should be considered the same as well. If we expect quality education, but sometimes we emphasize care and education, we expect it, but sometimes we have to emphasize these words separately to remind everyone that care and education is hand in hand. Last but not least in importance, our teachers should be the most famous cultural icons in every local society, celebrated, acknowledged for their humble, inclusive, lifelong learning dispositions, and cared for too, because the cultural belongingness will transfer to our children. Only then will children reach their great individualized potential. Only then will they fly to the learning destinations they desire. Were you raised to celebrate teachers and to ask children for their opinions? We must remember to do this, and we must tape this reminder to our foreheads every day. As leaders, we may think we know what's best, but we cannot do any of this work without the reminders, inspiration, and insights we gain from listening to all of the people we support. On behalf of OMEP, thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting children and teachers. It's been an honor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jesse. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh my God. I'm a teacher myself. My wife is a teacher. I know plenty of teachers. And you have summed it all up for us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. I know there's a lot of, practically everyone here is an educator. So on behalf of everyone here, thank you for that. Thank you.